The flakes were no longer gentle. They were tiny, frozen needles, driven by a wind that moaned through the skeletal trees lining the desolate mountain road. My breath plumed in the air, a ghostly white that was instantly snatched away. Every part of me was shaking, a deep, rattling tremor that had started in my bones and now commanded my entire body. The engine of my beat-up sedan had died an hour ago with a pathetic cough, and my phone had followed suit 30 minutes later, its screen a mocking black mirror. Kevin's text was the last thing I'd seen. Sorry, can't. Something came up. Something always came up. My nurse's scrubs, thin and worn under my inadequate coat, were useless against the cold. I had been so close to home, so close to a hot shower and the blessed oblivion of sleep after a 16-hour shift. Now, I was just another statistic waiting to happen, a cautionary tale for the morning news. The irony was bitter on my tongue. I spent my days fighting to keep life inside broken bodies, and I was going to lose my own to a dead battery and a man who couldn't be bothered. The snow was beginning to accumulate on my shoulders, a heavy, wet shroud. My feet were numb inside my soaked sneakers. It was a stupid way to die. Headlights cut through the swirling white, a sudden, blinding glare that made me throw a hand over my eyes. The vehicle was a long, black shadow, moving with an unnatural silence, its tires crunching softly on the fresh powder. It slid to a halt beside me, a predator assessing its prey. I held my breath, a new kind of fear, sharp and immediate, eclipsing the dull terror of freezing. This wasn't a friendly local in a pickup truck. This was something else. The passenger door swung open, an invitation and a command. A man leaned across the opulent leather interior. His face was all harsh angles and shadows, but it was his eyes that snared me. They were the color of old whiskey, dark and intense, and they were fixed on the faded hospital logo on my scrubs, visible where my coat had fallen open. "Get in," he said. His voice was a low gravel, strained with something I couldn't place. It wasn't a request. I hesitated for only a second, the wind stealing the warmth from the car's interior. The alternative was a slow, solitary death. I scrambled inside, pulling the heavy door shut, the sound a solid, definitive thud that sealed me in. The wave of heat was so intense it was painful against my frozen skin. The air smelled of rich leather, expensive cologne, and something else. Something metallic and coppery. Blood. My gaze dropped to his left side. A dark, spreading stain marred the perfection of his tailored suit jacket. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist before I could point or speak. His grip was shockingly strong, a band of steel. The contact was electric, a jolt of heat against my icy skin. "Don't," he commanded, his jaw tight. I looked from the bloodstain back to his face. His skin was pale beneath its olive tone, a fine sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cold. My professional instincts, buried under layers of exhaustion and fear, began to stir. Shock. Significant blood loss. "You need a hospital," I said, my voice hoarse, chapped. I tried to pull my wrist free, but his grip only tightened. "No hospitals," his eyes bore into me, assessing, calculating. He wasn't just a man. He was a nexus of power, an aura of absolute authority radiating from him even as he bled out onto his $1,000 seats. He finally released my wrist, leaving behind the imprint of his fingers. "You're a nurse," a statement, not a question. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Lena." "My name is Lena," he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. I know. The car began to move again, gliding forward into the blizzard as if the treacherous conditions were a minor inconvenience. The simple, terrifying finality of his words, I know, settled in my stomach like a block of ice. He had not found me by accident. Or if he had, the accident was now over, and this was something else entirely. This was a summons. He was driving away from the city, deeper into the snow-choked mountains. Every mile took me further from the world I knew, from the life of quiet desperation and unpaid bills, and plunged me deeper into his. We drove for another 20 minutes in a silence that was thick with the unspoken. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic sweep of the wipers, and his shallow, controlled breaths were the only sounds. I watched the landscape outside become a white void. There were no other cars, no houses, no lights. Just the impenetrable wall of the storm. He had a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, clipped language I didn't recognize. Italian, maybe? He gave a string of commands, his voice never rising, yet carrying an unmistakable weight of lethal authority. When he hung up, he turned his head slightly, those whiskey eyes pinning me again. "You will take care of this," he said, gesturing to his side. "And you will not ask questions. I don't have any supplies," I protested, the nurse in me overriding the terrified woman. "That looks like a gunshot wound. It needs to be properly cleaned, debrided. You could get septic. You could die." A flicker of something, not quite amusement, but a dry acknowledgement of the irony, crossed his face. "Everything you need will be provided. Your only concern is keeping me from dying." He said it with a chilling lack of emotion, as if discussing a business transaction. My life, my skills, were now a commodity he had acquired on a snowy road. The car turned onto a private, unmarked road, the entrance flanked by stone pillars I could barely make out in the blizzard. A heavy iron gate, wrought with intricate designs, swung open for us without a sound, operated remotely. We were entering a fortress. The driveway was long and winding, flanked by ancient pines heavy with snow. Then, the house emerged from the swirling whiteness. It wasn't a house, it was a mansion, a sprawling structure of stone and dark wood and glass, light glowing warmly from within. It was a beacon of impossible wealth and isolation. An older man was waiting for us under the portico as the car pulled to a stop. He was tall and silver-haired, his face a mask of worried composure. He opened the driver's door and helped the bleeding man, my captor, out. "Julian," the older man said, his voice laced with concern. "Marcus," Julian grunted, leaning heavily on him. "Get her inside. Get the kit." He didn't look back at me. I was a tool to be utilized, a problem that had been solved. Marcus opened my door, his expression unreadable but not unkind. He had the eyes of a man who had seen too much and had made his peace with it. "This way, miss," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. I followed him, stepping out of the cold and into a foyer that was larger than my entire apartment. The floors were heated marble, the air was warm and smelled faintly of cedar and old books. It was a gilded cage, and the door had just locked behind me. My old life, with its familiar struggles and tiny freedoms, felt a universe away. The exhaustion, the cold, the fear, it all crusted in a wave, and my knees buckled. Marcus caught my arm, his grip firm and steady. "Steady now. He needs you." His words were a splash of cold water. He was right. Whatever this was, wherever I was, my survival was now inextricably linked to the survival of the dangerous man bleeding in the other room. Marcus led me into a vast library. Bookshelves soared to a vaulted ceiling. A fire roared in a stone hearth. Julian was slumped in a leather wingback chair, his face ashen. He had shed his jacket, and the white shirt beneath was a ruin of crimson. Another man, younger and built like a bull, stood guard by the door, his hands clasped behind his back. Marcus returned with a large, professional-looking medical kit. It was more comprehensive than the crash carts in my own underfunded emergency room. He placed it on a heavy oak table beside me. "Whatever you require," he said softly. "Just ask." I took a deep breath, pushing down the tremor in my hands. I was a nurse. This was my job. I could compartmentalize. I had to. I knelt beside Julian's chair, my movements becoming automatic, precise. I cut away the ruined fabric of his shirt. The wound was high on his left side, just below the ribs. A through and through. Ugly, but the bleeding wasn't arterial. He'd been lucky. Or unlucky, depending on your perspective. "I need hot water, sterile cloths, and a good light," I ordered, my voice gaining a sliver of its professional confidence. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Julian watched me, his expression unreadable, his breathing shallow. His skin was hot to the touch. He had a fever already. "You're calm," he observed, his voice a low rasp. "I'm a nurse," I said, not looking up from my assessment of the wound. Panic doesn't clean wounds or stop bleeding. I could feel his gaze on the top of my head, on my hands as I organized the supplies Marcus brought. There was an intimacy to it that was terrifying and unnerving. I was touching him, My fingers probing the damaged flesh, my entire focus narrowed to this single, violent point of entry on his body. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound as I began to clean the wound, the antiseptic stinging sharply. He just watched me. For the next hour, the world shrank to the space around his chair. The library, the silent guards, the blizzard outside, it all faded into a blur. There was only the task at hand. I irrigated the wound, removed a small fragment of fabric with a pair of sterile forceps, and packed it loosely with gauze. He needed antibiotics, powerful ones, and constant observation. I found a broad-spectrum injectable in the kit and prepared a dose. "This will hurt," I warned, holding the syringe. "I've had worse," he murmured, his eyes finally closing for a moment. I administered the shot into his deltoid, my touch as gentle as I could manage. As I worked, I was acutely aware of him not as a patient, but as a man. The solid muscle under his skin, the faint scent of his cologne now mingled with blood, the sheer physical presence of him that seemed to suck all the air from the room. When I was finished, I bandaged the wound tightly, my hands brushing against the warm, firm skin of his torso. A strange current passed between us, a silent acknowledgement of his vulnerability and my control over it. In this moment, in this one specific way, the powerful Julian Thorne was completely at my mercy. "Done," I said, sitting back on my heels, the adrenaline starting to recede, leaving a profound weariness in its wake. "For now, you need rest. And I need to monitor you for signs of infection or internal bleeding." He opened his eyes. They were clearer now, the pain having receded into the background. "Marcus will show you to your room," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. "You will not leave it." The gilded cage had just shrunk to a single room. Marcus led me up a grand, sweeping staircase and down a long hall lined with art that probably cost more than I would make in a lifetime. The room he showed me to was beautiful, decorated in shades of cream and soft gray, with a king-sized bed that looked like a cloud and a private bathroom larger than my kitchen. A set of clothes was laid out on the bed, a simple black sweater and soft pants. My size. The detail was not lost on me. They hadn't just found me, they had been prepared for me. "Rest," Marcus said from the doorway. "Food will be brought to you. I will retrieve you every 2 hours to check on him." He closed the door, and I heard the soft, final click of a lock. I was a prisoner. A well-appointed prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress impossibly soft, and finally let the tears come. They were hot, silent tears of fear, exhaustion, and a terrifying, bewildering sense of displacement. I had been abandoned in the snow, only to be rescued by a monster who now owned me. Over the next 2 days, a strange rhythm established itself. Every 2 hours, day and night, Marcus would unlock my door and escort me to the library where Julian rested. I would check his vitals, change his dressing, and administer his medication. He rarely spoke, but his eyes followed my every move. The fever broke on the second day, and a little of his color returned. He started taking broth and then solid food. I could see the strength flowing back into him, and with it, the balance of power shifted back entirely to his favor. During one of my checks, while Marcus was out of the room fetching more water, Julian spoke. "You have a sister," he said. My blood ran cold. "Maya. She's in her final year at university. Art history. You've been sending her half your paycheck every month to keep her there." I froze, my hand hovering over his bandage. How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Lena," he said, his voice soft but laced with steel. "I know about the $200,000 in student loan and medical debt your parents left you. I know about Kevin, the boyfriend who left you on that mountain because he was too scared to pay back a gambling debt to the wrong people. I know that you work double shifts to stay afloat and that you haven't taken a day off in 3 years." The violation of it was breathtaking. My life, my private struggles, laid bare and dissected by this man. It was a threat, a clear demonstration of his reach. He was showing me that there was no corner of my life he couldn't touch, no one I cared about who was beyond his influence. "Why?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" "So you understand," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You think I rescued you. I didn't. I acquired you. The men I have a disagreement with, they are the same men Kevin owes money to. They were watching him. They saw him leave you there. If I hadn't found you, they would have. And what they would have done to you to get to me would have been far worse than this. The world tilted on its axis. It hadn't been an accident. None of it. I was a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. My anger warred with a new, chilling fear. He hadn't saved me from the storm. He had snatched me from the jaws of a different, more vicious predator. This rival, I said, finding my voice. What do they want? My territory. My business. My head on a platter, he said with a grim finality. And now, they know I have a weakness. They know I have a nurse hidden away in my home. They think you are important to me, am I? The question slipped out before I could stop it, bold and reckless. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened, intensified. You are now, he said. And in those two words, I felt the trap snap shut completely. The tension in the house grew thick over the next day. The guard at my door was doubled. Julian was on his feet now, pacing the library like a caged tiger, his arm in a sling, but his power fully restored. He took calls constantly, his voice a low, dangerous murmur. He was planning something. I was a part of that plan. I knew it. He summoned me that evening. He and Marcus were standing before the fireplace, a map spread on the table. Kevin has been in contact with them, Julian said without preamble. He told them where he left you. He described you. They've been trying to find you, the missing nurse. They believe you are my personal doctor. My confidant, they're fools, I scoffed, a strange bravado rising in me. No, Julian corrected. They're desperate. And they're going to use Kevin to get to you. He's going to call you. He's going to beg you to meet him, to help him. My stomach twisted. And what am I supposed to do? You are going to agree, he said, his eyes locking onto mine. You will set a place and a time. A public place. The cafe near your old apartment. You will go, and we will be there. You will be the bait. The cold dread was back, more potent than ever. He was asking me to walk into the fire. To risk everything. I looked at his face, at the unyielding set of his jaw, and then at Marcus, whose expression was grim but resolute. There was no choice. There never had been. All right, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll do it. The call came the next morning. Kevin's voice was a frantic, pathetic whine on the other end of the line. He was sorry, he was scared, he was in trouble. He needed to see me. I played my part, my voice trembling with manufactured concern, and agreed to meet him at the corner cafe at noon. When I hung up, Julian took the phone from my trembling hand. His thumb brushed against my knuckles, a fleeting, warm touch. You did well, he said. It was the closest he had ever come to praise. Hours later, I sat in a booth at the cafe, a cold cup of coffee in front of me. The place was almost empty. It felt surreal to be back in my old world, a world of cracked linoleum and the smell of stale coffee, after the silent opulence of Julian's mansion. I knew he was here. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his presence, a protective, dangerous blanket over the entire block. Marcus was sitting at the counter, reading a newspaper. Two other men who looked like nondescript office workers were at another table. The trap was set. Kevin stumbled in, looking haggard and terrified. He slid into the booth opposite me, his eyes darting around nervously. Lena, thank God, he whispered. You have to help me. These guys, it's over, Kevin, I said, my voice cold. His face crumpled in confusion. Just then, two men entered the cafe. They weren't from my world. They were sharp suits and cold eyes, the kind of men who carried violence as easily as a wallet. They walked toward our booth. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Before they could reach us, Marcus was on his feet, and the two office workers moved with swift, brutal efficiency. It was over in seconds. There was no shouting, no gunfire. Just a silent, professional takedown. The men were subdued and hustled out a back in trance before the barista even looked up. Kevin was white as a sheet, staring at me with a mixture of terror and betrayal. Marcus came over, put a hand on Kevin's shoulder, and led him away too. I was left alone in the booth, shaking. A moment later, Julian slid in opposite me. He looked at me, his whiskey-colored eyes searching my face. It's finished, he said. The threat is neutralized. You're safe. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 3 days. We sat in silence for a long moment. The adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow space behind. I was safe, but I was still his. We drove back to the mansion. The snow had stopped, and a weak winter sun was trying to break through the clouds. When we were back in the library, the fire crackling in the hearth, Julian turned to me. I'm offering you a choice, he said, his voice unusually formal. I have instructed my bank to clear all your debt. A separate account has been created in your name with enough money for you and your sister to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. Marcus can drive you back to your apartment right now. You can walk away from all of this, and you will never see or hear from me again. Your old life is waiting for you, free and clear. I stared at him. He was offering me the one thing I had been dreaming of for years: freedom. Financial freedom. The end of the constant, grinding worry. I could go back to my tiny apartment, my exhausting job, my lonely life, but without the crushing weight of debt. It was a clean slate. It was everything I should have wanted. But as I thought about it, a profound emptiness echoed through me. The idea of my old life, once a comfort, now seemed gray and lifeless. It was a world without this intensity, without this dangerous, protective presence that had consumed my entire existence for the past few days. A world without him. I looked at his face, at the guarded hope in his eyes, a hope he was trying desperately to conceal. He wasn't just offering me freedom, he was testing me. I weighed the two lives. One was safe, predictable, and lonely. The other was a gilded cage, fraught with danger, but it held a strange, compelling warmth. It held him. My old life wasn't a life, it was a slow-motion drowning. I had been abandoned there long before Kevin left me in the snow. And the other choice? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A muscle worked in his jaw. The other choice, he said slowly, is that you stay. He didn't say what that meant. He didn't have to. It meant this house. It meant his world, his danger. It meant him. I thought of the cold, of the biting wind, and the hopeless despair on that road. He had pulled me from it. He had brought me into the fire, but it was a fire that had burned away the numb shell I'd built around myself. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I took a step toward him, closing the distance between us. My sister, I said. She has to be kept safe. Always, she will be untouchable, he vowed, his voice thick with emotion. That was all I needed to hear. I reached out and laid my hand on his chest, over his heart. I could feel its steady, powerful beat beneath my palm. Then I'm not going anywhere, I said. A slow smile, the first I had ever seen from him, transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. He covered my hand with his own, his thumb stroking my skin, sealing the pact. The cage door was open, but I had no desire to fly. I was already home.